Here comes tomorrow, shining with promise, bright, brave new worlds for you to explore. If you don't like it, just hang around, 'cause tomorrow's tomorrow will reset the score. You can fight to turn the tide, try to rewrite, or just take flight, but you can't change the simple fact that it's where all your hopes are hiding. Here comes tomorrow.
Hello, homos, sapiens, and superior alike. My name is Josephine Riesman.
And I'm Becca Petunia.
We are two trans women, and we're here to talk about non-binary writer Grant Morrison's Turn of the Millennium comics run with the X-Men, and what it tells us about finding joy in a world that hates and fears us. In other words,
Here comes tomorrow.
That was a good one. We did a pretty good job with that
Hey,
one.
we're doing great. We're doing great. Here we
It's
are.
hard
Here
over
we are.
Zoom.
Here we are, probably in the last third of Grant Morrison's X-Men, and we finally managed to say "Here comes tomorrow," sort of
We're
in
somewhere
sync.
near there. Yes. We by the end we will be like the Stepford Cuckoos, except only two of us, and we'll just have
Yeah.
a dialogue bubble between us saying "Here comes tomorrow." But so Becca, what are we talking about today?
Well, we are talking about the Murder at the Mansion storyline, a storyline I've got a lot of feelings about that I'm excited to talk about with everyone here.
Oh boy.
Specifically, these are issues 139, 140, and 141 of Grant Morrison's New X-Men. Specifically, this time, art by Phil Jimenez and inks by Andy Lanning. In this arc, Jean Grey finds out about Emma and Scott's secret psychic affair and
Ooh,
gets reasonably angry at them.
very reasonably.
However, all of this is kind of interrupted when our good friend Emma Frost is murdered.
Well, bam! Somebody
Everyone,
shoots her, and little pieces of posh socialite are all over the office.
everyone's a suspect, so the X-Men need to call in an outside team to investigate this murder. Specifically, Bishop, returning from 90s X-Men,
Well,
and
not just returning from 90s X-Men, crossing over from Extreme X-Men along with the other
along
person.
with his Extreme X-Men co-star, Sage, the robot girl,
Robot Sage, formerly Tessa. Yes,
the
it's
girl whose mutant power is that she's a computer.
yeah, it seemed better in the 80s, and then as time went on, they kind of just sort of ran with it. But what's interesting is
There's one
like
point where he uses a pressure point to reset her,
I know it's
like
like what's
putting a
the
paper clip into a Tamagotchi. But anyway, we're getting ahead of things
Well, no, I just want to
because
say really quickly, it's important to note that these were two characters that were being written in Extreme X-Men, which was Chris Claremont's consolation prize for being kicked off the main X book in favor of Grant Morrison. So I always found this storyline most interesting for two reasons. One, it's kind of a weird comment on Claremont and what Claremont is doing. And two, this is like the rare occasion that you have a black X character like actually showing up in the Morrison run. Like, and Bishop doesn't like do that, like does stuff, but you don't get much character from Bishop in it. But anyway, keep going.
so anyway, as Bishop and Sage unravel this mystery in ways that don't make sense to me, I'm sorry, I should save my commentary for later. But as Bishop and Sage unravel this mystery, they unravel other mysteries around the X Mansion as well. In particular, we learn who's been selling drugs to Quentin Quire. We learn that Beak and Angel have kids. And most of all, we learn that Esme mind controlled Beak to shoot Emma after mind controlling Beast to believe he was at an opera because Esme is doing this for a secret exterior contact that we will learn a little bit more about in the future.
And we've already known a fair amount about, just so you know, well, I'm going to introduce our guest, but we'll spoiler a lot in this because there's a lot of things that make this storyline kind of a little sillier once you know how things turn out. But it's still worth talking about. And we're going to talk about it today with a wonderful guest, somebody I have known for well over a decade now in the comics and writing hustle. And that person is Evan Narcisse, the senior writer, who is a senior writer at Brass Lion Entertainment. And we are so excited to have Evan here. Evan's written so much about comics and genre media in general. And we're very eager to discuss and hopefully sort of squeeze blood from a stone and find some really interesting stuff in this. We called you in because you're a big hitter. We needed somebody smart to help us make this comic more interesting than it is.
I am so much more excited to talk to you than
Then
I
we are
am
to talk
to
about.
talk about Murder at the Mansion, a
That's right.
comic that is fine,
That's
but
fine.
compared to the high highs of the rest of this run,
Yeah, it's a little bit of a valley. But Evan, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. Waiting for my secondary mutation to kick in. Yes.
Yeah, waiting for your
Yeah.
secondary meet. I hear that. Mine did about 3 years ago, and I've never been happier. But
Yeah. I'm hoping for a spontaneous teleportation, but we'll see.
oh, that'd be good. I'd like that for you. So let's go back in time. How were you first introduced to the X-Men and then the Morrison run? In what order did those things happen, and what do you remember about those things?
Yeah. Man, I have a classic archetypal nerd origin story, like learn to read off comics.
Sure.
My first superhero memory is probably the 1978 Superman movie in the theaters and blah, blah, blah.
Uh,
Right. So like,
yeah.
comics and superheroes got their hooks in me early and have never really relented. I think a lot of longtime comics readers have a period of time where they just stop reading comics, and for me, really never have, for better or for worse.
Really, I
I'm
did.
just as expensive now.
Every guest, virtually every guest we've had on here has said some equivalent of the old, well, I was
Yeah,
reading them and then I ran out of money, or I was reading them and then they got bad, or
yeah,
whatever. But you're pretty consistent. That's pretty remarkable.
yeah. And I haven't stayed with every
Every
title.
title,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah. But like I've never stopped like the practice of reading comics. The Ironically, the most time away from regular comics reading I took was when I started writing comics because I was
Right,
very concerned about like other ideas work finding their way into my own work, so I just pretty much stopped. But that was actually a mistake because I felt like perilously behind in a bunch of shit I was reading and enjoying. And the other thing
sure.
was like, I realized, no, you have to be in constant contact with the form because there's so many different approaches. And if you're just, for me, if I'm just staying in my own head and trying to figure out, like, how do I make this page turn work or this subplot or whatever, and
Right.
not actually seeing what other people are doing, it feels like it built up the pressure a lot more in me internally. So, anyway, my first X-Men comics reading experience was probably some Neil Adams reprints, like the Roy Thomas Neil Adams stuff.
Oh, wow.
And
That's unusual for people in our.
Becca, you about to ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Becca. Yeah.
I was, yeah, it's like my internet cuts out once per recording. It's like every time. And usually when something interesting is happening. Evan,
Yeah, go ahead.
what year would this have been that you were reading these Roy Thomas, Neil Adams things? If you don't mind me putting a
No, it's
date
fine.
on
Yeah,
you.
like I'm a gentleman of a certain age, and I don't run away from that. So like, the Neil Adams reprints were probably something pulled out of a quarter bin back in the day. And again, if
Right,
you're of a certain age, you remember in the 70s, Marvel reprinted a bunch of like back catalog stuff under new titles, right? I don't
right.
remember how they did that with X-Men, but that's where I read that stuff. And
Sure.
if you're familiar with this run, and any of our listeners, that stuff is visually astounding. Like
Yeah.
Adams like uses different camera angles and visual approaches to really make things seem super super dramatic, and that's what pulled me in. And then
Yeah.
Roy Thomas is writing in the classic Stan Lee inflected style of like high drama.
Right.
So those things were two really powerful ingredients to get me pulled into the X-Men. I remember that storyline was the X-Men had just like changed the individual costumes. So it was Jean in the green dress and the yellow
Mm,
mask, Angel in like the multicolored outfit with the kind of suspenders, and so on. They look like suspenders. Go back and look.
I, I know.
But It was when Havoc was introduced. So like and
Yeah.
specifically there was that storyline where the Sentinels had come back and Havoc had been abducted, and there's that great cover of like the white and gold image of Havoc. So that I was hooked. And then, I really started reading intensely the X-Men during like Claremont Byrne, into the Dark Phoenix saga and beyond, and was like pretty much a regular reader. At some point after like the Jim Lee era, I dropped off, right? Once Claremont had left
Sure.
and the X line had kind of proliferated into like, half dozen, if not more titles, I was like, I'm good. I walked away from the X-Men for a little bit. Um, it kind of coincided with like the ascendancy of Image and stuff. And also I was finding some of the stuff that I liked about X-Men from a thematic perspective, more robustly executed elsewhere. So like if you know anything about me as a comics critic or a creator, like I love the Milestone Media comics of the 1990s. And
Great stuff. Yes.
yeah, so like I felt like the itch that I wanted scratched from X-Men is just being scratched better there. They had like a more multivalent kind of execution of diversity, and representation in those comics.
Yes, it was actually confronting the intersectionality of it, of the metaphor,
Yeah.
as opposed to our perpetual problem with the X-Men, which is a bunch of minorities who look just like the majority.
Right.
You know,
And to say nothing of the creative core of people making those stories. But
making the comics. Yeah, well, that's a whole separate thing. But yes,
yeah. So I'm trying to remember how I got to Morrison. I remember their work on Vertigo books, right? Like,
sure.
Doom Patrol and other stuff and
Invisibles and
Invisibles.
Animal Man.
Yeah, Animal Man. So like I was a Morrison fan. Some projects more than others. Like
sure.
Doom Patrol is something I had to go back and read because I feel like when I was first hitting it, like it was just too weird for me.
Same.
It's still weird, but like I think as you get older and understand like a larger context of what Morrison was drawing on and
And
all
what
that
they were
other stuff.
critiquing, I mean, their place in comics history becomes more apparent. And if there's anybody who understands their place in comics history, it's Morrison. They're constantly
Yes.
aware of that. But keep going. Yes.
Josie, it's still too weird for you. If I recall, Josie, you have not finished Grant Morrison's
I
Doom
haven't finished
Patrol.
Morrison's Doom Patrol. I need to, but every time I try to get through it, I reach a point where I'm like, this feels like it's bouncing off of me rather than being absorbed. But that's just me. I don't know. Keep going.
Yeah, but where Morrison really hooked me, and this is probably as much as about my own like biases and proclivities as it is their execution at the time. But that JLA run, like in the
Oh,
early aughts, is just
it's
for
great.
me like peak Morrison. It is so
It
good
is.
because one of the things about Morrison is that like clearly operating in this like the comics version of the British invasion where mad ideas and like really robust like world building and a willingness to blow up status quos every so often. Like you bring all that to like the kind of stalwart super team of the DC Comics universe, the Justice League, and like strikes this balance between like being reverent to like the past, like bringing in like weird C-list legacy characters like Connor Hawke. I love the way Morrison used Connor Hawke in
Oh,
the in
I missed
JLA.
that depiction of Connor. That one issue where,
Yeah,
yeah,
so
yeah,
good. So
no,
like it
keep
just felt
going.
like Morrison was using all the tools available, like in these
Yeah.
weird, interesting ways. So when new X-Men was announced, like I'm sure you guys have covered this, so I might be like the umpteenth person to say it, but
Please,
like
no, go ahead.
Morrison talking about the logo as a sigil was like I'm all the way fucking in. The way
Actually, not no one so far has talked about that. So thank you. Please go ahead.
We have not mentioned that either.
it is like maybe my core memory of like the announcement of the book. Like, yes,
Tell
quietly
me.
exciting. Like, but like I remember Morrison, because like to be a fan of Morrison's to watch their journey, like, explicitly talking about infusing magic and intention into books like Animal Man,
Yeah.
including themselves as a character.
In the Invisibles. Yeah, exactly.
But there's a way you as a reader can compartmentalize that and be like, yeah, that's weird shit for Vertigo books and Doom Patrol and whatever, right? Like,
Right.
but to bring into mainstream comics, like it was maybe like low key subtextual in the Justice League comics that they were writing, but by the time they get the X-Men, it's like, nah, I'm actually putting magic in the shit. It's on the cover.
Yes.
The new logo is a sigil. You can read it upside down and right side up the same way. And I'm
Yep.
like, you know, I'm in that level of intentionality to this
Yes.
franchise that I loved. Like I was like,
Oh,
let's fucking go. And then
Evan, it's a good thing. It's a good thing that we're already, a good ways into the series, into this recording, because Josie might kick me off the podcast for me saying that this is the first time I have realized that I can
yes,
turn the
see,
logo
it's
yeah.
on.
magic. It's
It's
magic
magic.
in multiple
So
senses of the
you
word.
just blew
I'm
my
not
mind.
kicking you off. It's great. I used to know that and had forgotten it. So thank you for that anamnesis. What I remember from the announcement, because they did a big rollout for this thing. Like it was a big frickin' deal at the time. What I remember was a Wizard magazine interview where Morrison just started to spit and was like, okay, here are all the archetypes that the good super teams that are successful are built on. And if you don't have a relatable real world archetype, it doesn't work. Doom Patrol is a support group. The Avengers are a football team. The Justice League are the United Nations. The Fantastic Four are a screwed up family. And the X-Men is a school. The X-Men is a school. It has to be a school. It has to be about old and young interacting in a way that is tense. And yeah, that was what got me personally. I was already reading the X-Men, so I was going to read this anyway. But I was like, oh, somebody
Yeah.
knows archetypes here.
And let's get back to that, right? Like to foundational things.
Yeah.
But with somebody like Morrison, is never just about going back to foundational
No.
understandings.
It's
It's like,
about going back to the foundational understanding and realizing that the foundational understanding was wrong and that there was actually something weird going on there. Like that's
yes,
what they eventually do with their Batman run, which we won't talk about as much, but like that was all about going back to the Batman comics of the 50s and
yeah,
60s and being like this stuff matters just as much.
And
right.
that's absolutely what they're trying to do here as well. I mean,
Yeah.
we talked a lot with ambient magnetic fields, or at least a little with ambient magnetic fields, about how Grant was bringing back characters from the 60s for that tribute to Magneto, like Eunice the Untouchable, who basically barely existed from like the 70s
Right.
forward. But I think also what Grant is returning to in terms of like returning to the foundations in the same kind of way that they literally do with the Batman run, but also figuratively do. But it's the idea that it's like, guys, there's five characters. There's five characters
Right.
in a school dealing with threats to mutant kind. We are not doing, the X-Men are in Australia. We are not doing the X-Men are in the Savage Land. We are not doing the X-Men are
They're
in
in
space. They're
space.
in space
Yeah.
only briefly, and it's
Very
it's to
briefly.
deal with an on-Earth problem. It's not like to deal with like you wouldn't believe what Corsair is up to.
You wouldn't
Um,
believe what rejected Star Wars ideas I have,
yep, I
Right,
mean,
exactly.
we love all of them. Corsair, the Skunk Woman, the Green
Hey, you
Guy.
get Hepzibah's name right, okay? Hepzibah got a lot of
Thank
people
you,
through a lot of
Evan.
lonely nights, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. But bringing it back to that core idea and like yes, it's going to be a lot more complicated than the Stan and Jack 60s stuff with five characters in a school because Stan and Jack, honestly, X-Men was the worst of the 60s books, I
Yeah, it was
think.
the least good. They didn't know what they were
And
doing.
also, Grant Morrison can't do anything simply. That's just not how their mind works.
No.
But it is a return to fundamentals in a lot of cool ways, and it definitely feels very intentional, keeping the cast small, keeping the cast focused on the in and around the school and things like that.
The other
What did you
thing
make of? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
just
Yeah,
gonna
so
say, the other thing about the launch of New X-Men that struck me was Grant calling the X-Men a rescue organization, and it's there in
Yes.
the introduction of this collection where I read it. Like, yeah, and it's like, yeah, it's about pulling often teenagers, new and emerging mutants like out of dangerous situations and giving them,
Yeah.
you know, a new context where they can learn more about themselves. And, you know, when this run was happening in terms of like, you know, social cultural moment in history, like the kind of like acceptance of like queer lifestyles that we take for granted now was not the case. You know, this is
No,
what this,
God, no. There'd even been
no.
more acceptance like 6 years prior, and
Yes,
then we had this
exactly.
huge cultural backlash.
Yeah, so to call the X-Men a rescue organization
Yeah.
and to like ramp up the freak factor on the mutants that are coming into the school, I think was an intentional storytelling choice. Again, to really hammer at the metaphor. And, you know, as I'm sure you guys have spoken about already, find its contradictions, you know,
Yeah.
look, it's been 20 some odd years, and it still takes me like, oh yeah, Glob. Glob is very much a thing. Glob has not gone away.
No, right, right,
And
right.
is like one of the freakiest like latter day X-Men creations to really have stuck, you know? Like you think about characters like Glob and Beak, again, the new Angel with the insect wings, and I'll include like Chamber from Generation X, even though this he predates this stuff. Is like,
Yeah.
you know, X-Men characters stopped being freaky like in the 80s and 90s. They all could pretty much pass for human, most of
Right.
them. Again, I'm thinking about there are exceptions like Marrow too, but like anyone who's like physically more non-conforming from a visual design perspective, like they amped up the freak factor on those
Hmm.
characters, and like Morrison leans all the way into that shit in New X-Men.
And at the same time, I really love what you're saying about this sociocultural moment being very dangerous for queers, because what Morrison is trying to say is sometimes when life is most dangerous for a population, that's when that population's art and culture are
Yeah.
being most celebrated. It often goes hand in hand, and it's
Yeah,
very
as somebody
scary.
who grew up alongside hip hop,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
I don't have to spell it out to you, but like, yeah, exactly.
And we talked about that in an earlier episode,
Yeah.
literally mentioning, Black culture and how it truly feels like Black culture
Just
is
is American culture. Yeah.
everybody loves Black culture, but
Right.
they don't love Black people. It
Right.
feels like that
Yeah.
yeah,
is
yeah,
so much of mainstream culture.
Right. And that's what Morrison's trying to make a comment about, but also about queer culture
Hmm.
and
yeah,
the intersection of the two, queer Black culture, which
yeah.
is sort of the origin point of most internet language now.
Most most queer culture starts with Black queer culture, and
I'm gonna
I will say it.
right. It's just it's interesting to see this. I mean, it's not the focus of this storyline, the whole Jumbo Carnation thing, but like the
Yeah.
assassination of a mutant designer, and at a time when like everybody's talking about mutants is it's interesting. I don't know what to do with it because this is what we talk about in every episode. The mutant metaphor is so dangerous that the minute you start poking at it,
Yeah. It's seductive because again, there's a siren call at the heart of the metaphor that is like, yeah, if you don't feel like you don't belong, there's a place for you. That's actually
right?
your difference is your superpower. But like, I mean, I'm just gonna say it, like most X-Men comics have not been written from the trenches, you know? Like,
No, they
Hmm.
have not. You are totally
Hmm.
right.
and
You're speaking my language, Evan.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
I spent the entire first two episodes just talking about this.
they've not been written from the trenches, so they're romanticized. And you know, look, they're superhero comics. They're supposed to exaggerate and amplify and make things into metaphors. But
Yeah,
like,
exists in the realm of myth, but yeah,
yeah, but they romanticize to the point where like that romanticized interpretation
yeah,
becomes the actual text, right? And not the
yep.
subtext. So, you know, that's where, again, I'm sure Becca, Josie, you guys have talked about this, but like the Malcolm X, Martin Luther King
No,
thing,
We actually
like,
haven't talked about that
we
either,
haven't
Evan.
talked about it, but let me tell you, I've talked about it.
I'm
Not on
rolling
this
my
no,
pod,
eyes.
yeah, I know
not
you
on this
have. Yeah,
pod, but
yeah,
like it's amazing to me the degree to which that went from Magneto and Charles Xavier are kind of like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, to a
yeah,
point where now no one learns anything about Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, but they do learn about Charles Xavier and Magneto. And when you are a kid who doesn't get great education, which is most kids in America, you learn about the mutants first. And that's kind of dangerous, I think, that we're not learning the historical figures. And when you finally learn the historical figures, you get people go, oh, that's like Charles Xavier and Magneto. And it's not.
And look, my own personal headcanon is this, right?
Tell me.
Like one, it's complicated because I'm going to say obviously, but it may not be obvious. But like, I do not subscribe to the idea that those two characters were imprinted on like civil rights leaders of the '60s, right?
Oh, no.
Like, which is not to say that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and their cohort were people who lived in the world, and especially Kirby, like with his proud, Jewish identity and his service in the war and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like he knows what's swirling around the world in terms of like sociocultural energies, but like.
But that's not what those early X-Men comics
No,
are.
they're not. Those are the X-Men comics about, oh my God, aren't teenagers weird? Like,
right.
And they're written by like middle-aged men. You know what I'm saying? So
right.
like, again, they're not in the trenches.
And Magneto, of course, doesn't become
Oh yeah,
a nuanced character until well into the Claremont run.
Yes.
Like
right.
in the 60s, he's basically doing, fucking surrender Dorothy shit on to the X-Men.
yeah.
Right.
So that's one part of the metaphor. And the other part is like, and again, we're in my own personal headcanon here. There's like a story about the Marvel bullpen years, like in the 60s and 70s, that I pretty much believe. Josie, we may have to.
Oh, tell me. I'm very curious.
A journalist team up on this, but like it's a story about Denny O'Neil wearing like a peace pin, like on a jacket or a lapel, and like Stan Lee ripping it off. He's like, "We don't do any messaging here." So like,
right, I've heard that story. Yes, and you buy it.
I do buy it
to me. It makes sense to me. Yeah.
Stan, and we're not going to get into like grievances around Stan, but
No.
like Stan was a canny huckster, right? So he knew
Yes.
that like anything that has a perception of political allegiance one way or another could fuck up the success they were having in the market.
That's correct.
Right?
That's
so
correct.
You're not going to tell me the guy who did that also was like, who we should model these characters off of are like Martin Luther.
No, but here's the thing, and I hate to interrupt you. They were eventually modeled on two major liberationary figures, but they were two Jewish figures.
Yes.
There's Claremont,
Yeah.
who's Jewish, basing
Yeah.
them on David Ben Gurion and Menachem Begin.
Yes.
And I'm sure you were building to that, but like...
Yeah, like I think if there's any subtextual references being made in those characters, it's probably closer to the experiences that, the creators had. So
Right.
like Claremont,
He lived on a kibbutz. He met Holocaust survivors, and he lived on a kibbutz where people were very nationalistic and divided about what the Jews should do. And that informed a lot about how he wrote the X-Men eventually.
Yeah, so, again, going back to the mutant metaphor, which is where we went on this big
Please.
tangent. I'm sorry if you guys can hear my dog in the background.
We can't. Zoom is amazing.
Yes, yeah, the noise canceling is off the hook. It's what you get as part of the surveillance state.
That's true. But no, I don't hear anything.
Good. Yeah, so, back to the mutant metaphor, and specifically as Morrison invoked it in New X-Men, it's like, yeah, like freaks to the front, that young, dangerous teenage energy, which is again the whole starting point of X-Men as a franchise. Is like, aren't teenagers weird?
Yes.
Like not to get into like meta comics history, but like teenagers as a socioeconomic class really didn't exist until after the war, right? So like that's why you see romance comics blooming, and you can see those approaches inside the original Lee and Kirby X-Men. Oh, Angel's wrapping his wings because he's a freak and nobody's going to want to be with him. Meanwhile, this is a beautiful ass cishet white man. You know what I'm saying?
Who's got more money than God.
Right,
yeah,
exactly. But yeah, tell me again about your problems, Worthington the Third.
Right.
And I think one of the things that's brilliant about what Morrison does is like he brings it right back to that. It's like, so this storyline that we're talking about, Murder at the Mansion, like the notional like nugget inside of it is the fucking affair of Scott and Jean, yes, but also like Beak and Angel, banging it out and making weird little insect bird babies, like and that being like a thing that they're hiding because that's what teenagers do when they get pregnant.
Evan, you know how I know you're the best in the biz? You managed to take it back to Murder at the Mansion without me having to say like,
Can
so
we bring
that's
it
all
back to the
nice.
topic? Yeah,
But
exactly.
um, but yeah, I mean, Beak and Angel are such interesting characters, and I feel like if there's anything interesting to talk about in this one, it's Beak and Angel. And
Yeah. Scott and Jean feels like the logical conclusion of what you would expect to happen.
although I
But
should
Beak,
I should
right,
address on the pod, I'm eating crow. I said that Scott and Emma hooked up in Hong
in
Kong.
Hong Kong.
I was on the pod saying that they hooked up in Hong Kong, and Scott and Emma are here to tell me no, they did not hook up in Hong Kong. So I'm sorry, Scott. You and I have a complicated years-long relationship. You know, I'm sorry I ever doubted you.
You're off the hook for this one, but only this one.
Yeah. But like Josie's saying, it's the logical conclusion. It is the logical sort of like, yeah, this is what we would expect, the Jean and Scott story to become. If anything, it seeds some Phoenix stuff that we're going to be seeing in the future. Yeah, but there's I don't know. Do we have anything to say about them, or do we just want to talk
No,
about
I
Beak?
have plenty to say because this is my first time.
I was gonna say you're not on the podcast every week. Josie and I have said
Yeah,
our
so we
fill.
want to hear what you have to say,
Yeah, this is
please.
my first time rereading the storyline, probably since the original run. And, what's interesting is like for all that has been made of Scott and Emma over the years, like with Whedon and Astonishing X-Men and after that, is that like it's not as dirty as it kind of implies that it is, you know? Like
Yes.
you know, and again, it's something that is interesting when we think about like what dating looks like now. This is like a precursor to all of that, right? When Hickman had the adjoining rooms for Scott and Gina
Yeah,
Logan,
yeah,
and
yeah,
everybody, but like it's really kind of forward looking, right? It's like, but
yeah.
like it's if Scott and Jean eventually open up their relationship, like this is where that shit starts, right? This is where the storyline starts. It's like
Well, yes, exactly.
I
Oh,
mean, it's not like a ethical non-monogamy, because
But
Gene feels betrayed, and there's clearly no discussion about like, hey, you know what? I think I might want to mess around with some other telepaths just to see,
right.
little kink in the mix now.
it's
Which
also weird
again,
that the kink is specifically my new girl
All
dressed as
dressed
my
up.
old girl.
yes,
But
but also like what's really interesting about this seeming betrayal, quasi betrayal in Murder at the Mansion is like Scott is yearning to be able to talk to somebody the way he
Yes.
used to with Gene, right? Like
Yeah.
Scott is Mr. Perfect, Mr. Follows Orders, Mr. First Student at Institute, all that
Yeah.
shit. And, like, he's like, I think it's less about the transgression and the seduction of cheating or stepping out, and more
Yeah.
about like a yearning for the kind of connection he used to have with Gene. Now, Gene is too perfect, too powerful, too scary.
Yeah.
Scott
Yeah.
feels like somebody who has flaws, has acknowledged them. Um, but now, like, Jean is kind of flawless because the amount of control that she has to have as a host of the Phoenix Force means that, like, he says, I can't talk to you anymore.
Right.
So I thought that was really interesting. Like, look, most fans first encounter Emma Queen as some kind of dominatrix, stand-in, right? And the interesting turn I thought here was like, yeah, like the whole rich girl who divested herself of her privilege and started to make her own way in the world by herself. Like this feels like the first time we saw that, right? I haven't brushed up on my Emma history, but it feels like this is the first time.
There around this time,
when was the Emma prequel series?
spinning out of this, they had an Emma prequel series that it filled in all those blanks. I'm not enough of a Claremont expert to know how much of this had been teased or seeded in little bits in
Yeah,
the past, but we had not seen it in this level of detail, I don't think.
yeah. So going back to the Scott and Jean stuff, it's like, look, this is the 7-year itch. Like in
Yeah.
Mutantdom's like celebrity couple,
It's
and
literally, I mean, the Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, their honeymoon's 94. This is 2001. There you
yeah,
go.
yeah, and like these two characters have like we've seen them kind of yearn for each other, specifically Scott for Jean, like
Yeah.
more than actual like consummation or like, we've almost never seen them as like the kind of like iconic married couple like the way that Reed and Sue have been portrayed, right? They never had
Sure.
like the when Scott was at his most domestic with Madeline Pryor, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
He fucked off to Alaska and lived with her and like that was him being like Mr. Domestic happy husband. With
Yeah.
Gene, it's always been turmoil, Like so
Yeah.
I kind of get if you take his history all in aggregate, you kind of understand where like it's like, fuck, I just want to be able to talk to my wife without being scared that anything I say is gonna fuck everything up and unleash the phoenix on the world. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right,
that's
right.
kind of relatable.
Oh, it's very relatable. I mean, this is the nature of loving. I mean, look, I always say that the real metaphor that Gene is dealing with, or that Gene is in this run, is bipolarity. And I live with bipolar too, and it's very much written in that vein. And I know my partners historically have had to tiptoe around me at times. Like it's very frightening to be around someone who is capable of either falling into of either rising like a phoenix into this fiery being that can do anything, or becoming the dark phoenix and just being abysmally consumptive and
And
dour.
hollowing the other person or persons or worlds out.
Right, right. And the thing is, like, I I love the Scott Jean relationship because it really is a relationship. It's not just, oh, Scott has to keep from messing with Jean, and like Jean's explosiveness is just an extension of Scott's decisions. Jean really has her own agency in this whole run. Like Jean is not an extension of Scott.
Yeah.
Scott is continually triggered by Jean and his fears of Jean. But Jean kind of has her own thing going on. Like anytime the marital difficulties come up, Jean, because Phoenix is back, almost feels like my marriage. Oh, right, that. Yeah, who gives a
Yes.
shit?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Which
I
also
think
feels terrible for Scott, I'm sure.
and something that's interesting at the end of this little mini arc, because this arc is really only 3 issues long, but
Yeah,
like
it's just a little one.
talking about Scott and Jean and Scott's fear and anxiety, it's interesting that like this is one of those moments where Morrison chooses to take the Scott and Logan relationship in the direction he does. He's like, yeah, that woman's trouble. I get it.
Yeah.
She's a flame, you're the moth. But like, as somebody who's reckoned with his own duality, Logan is like,
Uh,
dude, hang on. You need a break. You need to like, um, the next storyline is Assault on Weapon X, if I remember
Weapon
correctly.
Plus, yeah,
Weapon
when they
Plus,
actually.
yeah. And
Right, it
and
begins with the two of them in a strip club
yes,
drinking.
exactly. Yeah. And it's
Yeah,
like, you want to see some wild shit. It's like you're scared of the
yeah.
wild shit in your wife. Let me take you to where they fucked with me and like some of my buddies. Like it feels like Logan kind of giving Scott perspective. Because the thing about Scott is, he's so tightly wrapped. My ruby quartz glasses, all that shit. Um,
No.
he's so tightly wrapped that like he's not a guy who knows how to let go. And I think the subtext that Morrison is playing with the affair with Emma is that like it's even when Scott is being transgressive, he's still centering this relationship with Jean and like the normalcy,
Yes.
the seeming stability that his fetish is for like stability here. Like he's like maybe we can fuck around in our minds. You put on the Dark Phoenix outfit, and I can figure out what the fuck this all means. You know?
Well, yeah, it almost feels like he's somebody who's longing for, you said the word earlier, a dominatrix to help
Yes.
him
Yeah.
figure things out.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's what I kept
Well,
thinking was like,
there's
yeah, go
oh
ahead.
go no 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 Josie, you
No,
were
I
you
was
were
gonna
gonna
say
go.
she talks about like being I'm a sex therapist, but like she's a dominatrix, which like I'll come out here. I've seen a dominatrix. It was one of the most psychologically breakthrough moments of my life. Like dominatrices, we are very pro dominatrix as a profession here. It can be something that really transforms you, even if it is transgressive, and especially because it's transgressive. And it's really interesting to see how that plays out.
Sorry, just real quick, Becca.
No, go ahead.
In order to enter that relationship, and I'm not somebody who's like deep in that world, but like I understand
Me
enough to
neither,
know
but
to
yeah.
like in order to give up control, there has to be trust, you know? And like
Yes.
control has always been a huge thing for Scott, and so is trust, you know? Like
Yes.
so like he's at a moment where he's like he doesn't know what he can trust anymore because how much is my wife Jean Grey, the woman I've loved my entire life, and how much is the Phoenix? And you know,
Hmm.
I let me talk to somebody who's deeply versed in the control dynamics, you know, like Emma
Yep.
Frost and your fucking Hellions and all that shit
Yep.
to get some perspective. And then look, this is a lot of this is a bit us being interpretive, but like the
It's
point
comics. What
I
else
was
are you
gonna say the
supposed to
same
do
thing.
with
Like
them?
the point is like whether consciously or not, like Morrison is seeding the horizon with all of this stuff, right? And you know, I think it's great that we're seeing an older couple going through their shit, you know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
like contrasted with the younger couple of Beak and Angel who are like clearly just horny teenagers. Like, you don't even know if they love each other, but like they're
They
like,
don't know. Yeah.
right. And you know, the big mystery of them hooking up and then having kids is hilarious to me because I think one of the things that Morrison does in this storyline, especially, is
Hmm.
bring all this British class stuff into play, right?
Mm.
Like, so, you know, again, generally up until this point, we've understood that Emma is like a posh, well off sex club telepath, you know what I'm saying? Then
Right.
we're like, oh no, you had the money, you ran away from the money, you made money on your own, and while you're in the same kind of socioeconomic position, your mental relationship to it is different because you did it
Right.
on your under your own steam, right? So that's
Right.
one thing. The other thing is like the boarding school shit, right? This is all boarding school drama in this
Oh, yeah.
story arc. Uh, but like the tawdriness of Scott and Emma's, you know, telepathic fling reminds me of again, I'm old, so I remember when New Wave was played on the radio, and
Yeah.
a couple of years back, I dated somebody who loved New Wave and reintroduced me to a lot of his music. And
Huh.
reading this storyline reminds me of the English beat song "I Confess."
I don't know that one. I like the English beat though.
It's got a great it's like trapped between two worlds, and it's got a great saxophone line. But if you read about the inspiration for that song, which was a big hit, it was like the English tabloids had these gossip columns or like confessional was like, you know, like this society person was caught cheating or whatever. And that's what
Right.
this
Right.
feels like. This feels like all that kind of like Fleet Street
Oh.
yellow journalism type of
Yeah.
shit,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
working its way into the storyline. Like, oh, these people you've looked up to have their own foibles too. And
Right.
that
Right.
really makes it interesting to me. And then you bring in Bishop and Sage,
Tell me what
who
you
like
make of them in this story, because they're just sort of ciphers, aren't they? Or
they
do you
are
think
like Bishop could have been like a human police
cop?
detective here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was like
like
they make this big deal to be like, I'm Lucas Bishop, I'm a mutant detective. And it's like, what? Okay, so what is,
yeah.
do mutant detectives operate differently? Because this feels just like a real boilerplate detective story.
So fun thing, if I can just jump in before we move on to Bishop, I just want to quickly say it feels like with Scott's big thing is like that he always needs to be perfect. And it feels like he always needs to be perfect. He always needs to be in control. So giving in to a dominatrix is a great way for him to cede control in a controlled environment. But I think more importantly is the idea that he feels he needs to be perfect. And this
Yeah.
is like, if I make the mistake, then things can't go wrong. It's like, well, if a
Yeah.
mistake is going to happen anyway,
Yeah,
I should
might as
just make the
well.
mistake and get over with it. If something's going to go wrong in Gene and my relationship, I might as
Yeah.
well be in control of what goes wrong in Gene and my relationship.
Oh,
And I've definitely
I
I've
know that
definitely felt
feel.
that way. That's something that I
Yeah.
think goes along with depression and anxiety and all of those things.
And closetedness, but yeah, keep going. Yes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I definitely just wanted to say that real quick before we move on to Bishop. What's interesting about Bishop is, so fun fact, I didn't watch X-Men 92 growing up.
The cartoon. Oh, interesting.
So,
Wait, let's pause on that. Why, Becca? Because I also did not, but I want to see if we have the same reasons.
Evan, we don't have the same reason.
Becca's a little young, so X-Men Evolution was Becca's show.
Oh, okay.
Evan, I was born in 1991. Um, so
Yeah.
we don't have
I
That
the
was
same
born in
explains it.
reason.
85. I was an X-Men 92 kid, and she was
X-Men
an X-Men
Evolution for
Evolution
sure.
Yeah,
kid.
yeah.
Mm.
But
And and I was a if sorry, just to close the loop on
Go
this.
back. Go back.
I'm born in 72 and I was an X-Men. I was Pride of the X-Men
yes, Pride
kid,
of the X-Men.
which like
Yes.
was something that I read about, and I think to this day I've only seen clips of it. For our listeners who
I
don't
had
know,
it on VHS. Can we all sing the original X-Men theme song here?
I don't even remember
There
it.
is no way I can
I
sing
will
it.
sing it for you. X-Men, 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 X-Men. And
So
now
for
you
our
know the
listeners who
theme
don't
song
know,
to Pride of the X-Men.
yeah, our listeners who may not know, Pride of the X-Men
Please.
was animated pilot of the X-Men that predates X-Men 92 by a
Mm-hmm.
couple of years. I don't think it ever even actually made it out except to like a bootleg VHS release, which I think is what you're referring to,
I
Josie.
think there was an official VHS release that was very limited run because I was not buying bootlegs and I was still a kid, but it was very hard to find. It was
Yes,
not
yeah.
widely distributed.
Yeah, but like we got about on the X-Men animated series, and like
Right.
the thing about me and X-Men 92 was that it was such a proximate like adaptation of these storylines from the comics. I was like, you know
Right.
what? I know most of this shit already. Like I know
Right.
like I part of it was I was an adult already with a job, so like Saturday mornings were like not a time where I was like watching TV anymore like I was a kid. The other part was again, I was familiar with a lot of the storylines. I did turn it on every so often to see, oh, they changed this with this character or whatever, right? But like,
Right.
part of it for me was like morph. I don't know. Seems kind of goofy. Like, that's not what I'm here for with my X-Men. But like, yeah,
Yeah.
like I think the generation of readers and now creators who imprinted on X-Men 97, like really got the soap opera of the X-Men comics delivered to them in a way that was like so hyperbolic. Like the
Oh,
most the
yeah.
most whiny version of Scott Summers ever is in those
Well, and
episodes.
this is why I always say that most people don't understand that Jean has a personality beyond nice, because by far
Right.
on X-Men 92 that's the case. The other thing that I'm gonna point out is that look, at the end of the day, if we can agree on one thing, it's that Gambit doesn't make no TV dinners.
Ah, yes.
So, but what I was saying is, even today I've only watched scattered X-Men 92. Clearly I have seen the
It's not
The
that
sequel.
good. Like I mean,
no,
X-Men
I have not
97.
seen the sequel.
Oh, really? Okay.
I'm gonna have to watch it for this, but
Yeah, this has been a topic. Once we're done with the Morrison run, I'm going to force Becca to finally watch X-Men 97 and we'll discuss it because it's obviously in direct dialogue with the
Yes.
Evan,
Yeah.
Morrison
Evan,
run.
I literally had to interview Charlie Feldman for a project I was working on. They were one of the writers of X-Men 97, and I did not know they were a writer for X-Men
Because
97.
it was an interview about a completely separate
It was
topic.
an
Yeah.
interview about a completely separate topic, and I was
Wow.
like, "So what else have you worked on?" And they were like, "Well, I was one of the head writers of X-Men 97." And I was like,
Huh.
And you're like, I've read the comics.
"But so the point is,
Yes.
this comic was my first time dealing with Bishop.
Right.
This was
Wait, the very first time,
the
really?
very first thing I read with Bishop.
Very
And I will
interesting.
tell you something. I think part of the reason I have no strong feelings towards Bishop is because he's nothing in this comic.
Yeah.
Right. They don't give you any reason to want to learn more about
My ground
Bishop.
floor for him will always be, I don't know, he kind of just wanders around and talks to a computer. He asks
And can I
Sage
also
to send an
say,
email using her mind.
Yes,
I
Evan.
also need to say, like, one of the things that's problematic about Bishop in this storyline is this is the most no drip ass uniform he's ever worn. It is like doesn't make
Very
any
true.
goddamn fashion sense. Like it's just
No.
Like his classic look, like from the Will Sportesio era, like
Great
you know,
stuff.
like there's lots of color contrast. It evokes the
Yes.
classic X-Men kind of like aesthetic, yellow, blue, black, all this
Sure.
stuff. This outfit does none of that.
No.
Like, let's not even talk about the hair, right? My man is it a Jerry curl? Like, what's going on? Bishop walking around looking like show enough in this bit.
Grant Morrison has struggled, and I say struggled generously, to write black characters for so
By
long.
struggled, you mean not, right? You mean
Yeah,
just
well,
not?
not, but when I
You
say
mean just like
struggled, I
never?
mean when they do, it's memorable, such as the Root Doctors from The Invisibles, Papa, what's his name? But I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah,
The point here is that Bishop doesn't have a whole lot to do, which was frustrating for me when I read it when it came out, because I love Bishop.
he doesn't even use his powers in this. He makes a reference to his
No, he
powers.
makes a
He's
reference
like,
to his
No.
powers,
yeah.
but like Bishop,
Again,
yeah.
and reading this as a teenager, because Evan, just for the record, I mean, everyone listening at home knows this. I didn't read these for the first time until it was at some point during the Obama administration,
Yeah.
Wow.
was when I read these for the first
Very
time.
different context. Yeah.
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 So, because again, like in 2001, I was 10. I could have been reading comics. I just wasn't reading X-Men comics. But anyway, I was reading manga.
But I just want to really briefly say, I want to shout out Bishop for those of you who are listening and are only reading the Morrison run. Really don't sell that character short.
No.
He
Yeah.
he has not been written consistently well, but when he's written well, he's a very interesting guy. Like I remember reading late 90s X-Men comics and finding him and Cable to be the most compelling characters. Now they're kind of flip sides of each other, and they're both
Yeah.
extremely muscular, gun-toting time travelers. But there was something about Bishop that was especially poignant because of the Age of Apocalypse, which had happened in 1995, and which situated Bishop as the only person who remembered what the world was before it became terrible. And I remember reading The Age of Apocalypse after it had already been published. I read it in those gold foil trade paperbacks. And that was when I fell in love with Bishop. It was just like the idea of being the only person who remembers the world as it was is something that is a very powerful metaphor that I think a lot of us can feel these days, where you're just like,
Yeah.
am I the only one who remembers that things used to not be as bad as this?
Josie, that is my
Yeah.
number one fear.
What?
This is like a weird paranoia fear that I have,
Tell me.
that what if the world is completely different now and I don't know it? Or the alternative,
Oh,
what if the world is completely different now and I'm the only one
only
who
one who
knows it?
knows it.
This is like a weird paranoia fear that I have.
That you
So,
get from reading comics, I'm just gonna
yeah,
say.
well,
Yeah.
this is fantasy TV shows, but
That
Well,
too, yeah.
like to offer my own spin on this, and I
Please.
posted about this on Blue Sky a couple of months ago, but like I saw my dad, who still lives in New York, late last year, and I was talking with him, and just, I always try to talk to him about like Haiti because,
Sure.
it's where my parents are from, but like I don't have much personal lived experience in the place.
Yeah.
But I was like, they separated with my mom, my when I was really young, so my mom raised us. Anyway, but I was like, talking to my dad and stepmom and realizing that like the Haiti they knew
Yeah.
like is gone forever, right? They knew a Haiti that was like the Haiti's nickname was like the jewel of the Antilles, right? Like it
Yeah.
used to have a tourist industry to rival Cuba's and other
Yeah.
places in the Caribbean, and then all the fuckery happened,
Yes.
political manipulation and stuff. And then
Yeah.
something I've realized, in my own lifetime now is like, yeah, the America I knew, my kid is never gonna know.
No.
Like the United
No.
States that I knew, like from a cultural like cohesion standpoint, which is not to say like, to praise like the monoculture
Like,
and stuff
no.
but like
No,
it
of
did
course
feel
not.
like the majority of the populace believed in like same ideals, even if the execution was fucked across the board, right? Like now it doesn't even feel like that. So to say that about Bishop is really interesting. The other thing for me that's interesting about Bishop is, and again, his backstory is so fractured in my,
Oh, it's so complicated. We're not even getting into
yeah.
Shard, his sister, who's a hologram sometimes.
okay,
Yeah,
I
come
didn't
on.
know he had a sister named Shaw.
Oh boy, does he have a sister named. Anyway, keep going.
Yes. But the thing about Bishop is the thing that's kind of romantic and aspirational to me and uplifting about him is like, you know, if I remember correctly, he comes from a future where like the X-Men and Xavier's dream is kind of institutionalized, right? Where it's like,
They overthrew the Sentinels, I believe, and
yeah,
then they sort of became Xavier's security enforcers. So he becomes a
exactly. So like,
cop.
yeah, so like there's enough stability and enough space for difference in the
Yes.
future that Bishop comes from, where like the kind of hated and feared stuff is being mitigated, if not actively like solved, right? It feels like
Right.
mutants have enough space to live and breathe and love and live and laugh, if I'm gonna fucking invoke the metaphor, the fucking
Yeah.
cliche all the way.
And
Like,
and be cops. That's the
yes,
other thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So like so for Bishop to come back in time and be like, yeah, shit is still kind of sketchy nowadays. Let me see
Yeah.
what I can do to make the future I come from manifest. It's a really powerful idea. Um, but you know, y'all, I just have to say this about Bishop,
Tell me.
and I'm gonna segue into like the part of the Marvel comics universe where I've had the most like experience.
Yeah.
My personal headcanon about Black Panther is, and Josie, you know this, you've talked to
Yeah,
Priest and other
tell me.
people,
Tell me.
but like every time a black person touches Black Panther, like the notional potential of the character in the franchise expands, right? You see
Yeah.
this when Billy Graham is drawing it in the 70s,
Yeah,
Jungle
sure.
Action, and Priest writing it in the 90s, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah,
And
Reginald
Ta-Nehisi,
Hudlin, all of them.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing is, that's about stewardship, right? And I feel like
Ooh.
there hasn't been a lot of black stewardship of these characters in the X-Men universe. Like
No.
Bishop specifically, I don't know if anybody black has written Bishop. Again, I don't want to,
No, you don't want a
overgeneralize.
blanket statement that, but like odds are there have
Yeah,
not, just because there aren't that many black people who get gigs
yeah.
in comics.
And the other thing is Bishop's own racial backstory. I remember being deeply mixed up. Like at one point, wasn't he teased to be like gateway? No, I'm thinking about
I
that's
think Manifold.
Manifold, yeah. But like there is some stuff in Bishop where it's like there's some like what my friend calls ethnic smudging, where like they're just brown. He's just brown. And
Yeah,
like
whatever. Yeah.
he's black, but also there's something else mixed in there. And we're not gonna bother to dig into it because it's not relevant to the character.
And
And
because
You
by which
need
we
you
mean the people writing it don't know anything about
yeah,
it and
you
yeah,
get
need
it.
this, like, not to sound like, again, not to use a different cliche, but a cliche we talk about all the time in like YA literature circles. But like this is why you need own voices
yeah,
literature, because again, the nuances of being black is just, it's something that I can't understand. Like I just can't. I mean, I can understand it
You
in
can
the sense that,
understand maybe on some level, but like it's not your lived experience, and there's going to be things that are completely beyond your blind spots are huge.
correct. Yeah, let me be clear. When I say I can't understand it, I don't mean like I don't
Yeah.
listen when people are talking and like
No, but I
pay
get what you mean.
attention. But like, and as a whole, again, I feel the same way about queer characters because again, that's kind of
Hmm.
what I focus on. And we don't often, we definitely see more. I hate to say we see more queer comics authors than black comics authors, but I feel like that is definitely the choice, at least for the big two.
Yeah.
But again,
Still not that many, but yeah.
no, but still not that many, and it means that you don't often have these things written in a way that feels true to the experiences of the people who they are talking
Can I
about.
tell you something? Can I tell you something? Not to pull this card too much, but you also don't have that many Jews writing comics who know much about Jewish history or Jewish religion or Jewish culture. And when you write Magneto, that's a very dangerous thing. And I find that deeply frustrating as someone who cares a lot about that character and cares a lot about the unfortunate and fortunate power that that character has had in the broader culture. It's very frustrating to me that you get these things written by people who aren't Jewish or who are Jewish and have absolutely no knowledge of what they're talking about. And this stuff, these are potent metaphors. The guy lived through Auschwitz. and he wants to be a genocidaire. Those are and he washed up in Israel and lived there for a few decades. These are things that you're playing with fire when you start playing with, and so few people are doing it from an own voices perspective. And I think that leaves it in a place where sometimes the stuff just comes out outright anti-Semitic. Personally, that's just me.
Garrick, maybe cut this that I'm about to say, maybe don't. We'll talk. But
Oh, about to get spicy.
this is kind of part of the problem with Kitty Pryde's arc in the Krakoa era.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It was not written by Jewish people,
No.
and that meant that it kept falling into pitfalls that should have been obvious.
Yeah, it would be totally obvious to
Yeah,
a
I
Jew writing
mean,
that
Garrick,
character.
don't
Yeah.
Garrick, don't cut this, because like it's why you have things like she gets cremated, she gets
Right. She gets a tattoo. Now, all
well,
these
and
things
plenty
I
of
think,
Jewish people have
I was
tattoos,
gonna say
but
these things, people do these things all the time, but like to have it just happen and not be addressed as something,
it's all of these things that just weren't handled in a way that felt really thoughtful. And again, it seems like without having read much Bishop stuff, but it seems like what you're describing, Evan, is like things that are addressed but not necessarily in a very thoughtful and conscious way.
yeah.
Like he's some kind of brown, I don't know. Like and
I
it's
mean,
like
look, another way to look at this is, through the character of Storm, who like
Yes, a contrast. Yes.
the most high profile black mutant in the Marvel universe. So I think we can say that without like any
Yeah,
question.
yeah. And for many people, the best character in all of Marvel. I mean, lots
Yes.
of people really, really stand her. Yeah.
How many stories have we had that really address Storm's intersectionality? You know what I'm saying? Like very few.
Very
And
few. And she
I
has some intersectionality because
yes,
she's
yes,
black and she's African and not the
yes.
same thing.
Yes,
mhm.
yeah. And there's some diaspora subtext in there about
Yeah.
being on the continent but not of it. Um, all that stuff, right? And Hudlin
Yeah.
deals with this in his Panther run a little bit, and subsequent writers have as well. And it's like that experience has got to be different for Storm,
Yeah.
And like we don't see it enough. And like maybe Bishop is from a future where racism is solved, but like he comes back to a present where it ain't.
Where it
And
ain't. Yeah, exactly. That I was just talking with my spouse about this. My dream now, I have no idea if it would do numbers, and maybe I shouldn't even say it out loud because someone will steal the idea, is I want to get a bunch of comics writers because I know a ton now and they don't get as much work as any of them would like. I want to do a book of comics and short stories, prose short stories, where people file the serial numbers off and write the story they wanted to tell with the character that they didn't get to tell. Because
yeah,
there's so much interesting stuff there. And I think that if
that's
you
like
end up
Super Gods, right? That novel from the 60s. Am I misremembering it?
Super Gods is the name of Grant Morrison's book.
No, Super Folk. Is it Super Folk? There was something like this. It was like in the 60s or 70s, and I think it was an influence on Morrison, whereas like you can tell these characters are supposed to be Superman
Right,
and
right,
whatnot,
right.
but like, copyright, but like it is like, yeah, what if? And I'm thinking about it was more of an essay, but it's like, Man of Steel, Woman of Tissue Paper, right?
Mhm.
I know.
Like let's take this character out of its like agreed upon context and
And put
really,
in, yeah.
yeah.
No, and I just think that there's so, and I should have said specifically what I meant was own voices stories.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
getting
yeah.
people who are of these demographics in one way or another to tell an interesting story that doesn't shy away from the demographic aspects of the character.
Yeah, again, I wrote a one pager. So the first Marvel Voices anthology that they did, I got asked to contribute, and they're like, "Who do you want to write?" I'm like, maybe Miles. I love Miles as a character, but I was like, no, I'm gonna write Doctor Voodoo, and like,
Yeah.
it was just a one page story, but like,
Yep.
the point was to seed it in Haitian history and culture.
Yeah. It was a beautiful story. You should
It,
all read it. Yeah.
Thank you. But like, you know, I don't think I stopped to think about it. I probably knew it subconsciously in the back of my head, but yeah, I was the first Haitian American writer to ever write the character. And
That's incredible.
I grew up seeing the character used as like the butt of a joke for a long time.
No shit.
So like I'm like, let's, and if you know anything about Haitians as a culture, like pride is like paramount because of our place in like colonial history.
Sure.
So like, yeah, I'm like, the fact that nobody's fucking talked about this, like to my
I
memory at the time
know.
of writing that, was like wild to me. And I feel like, again, mutants coming from all different walks of life, like there's so much potential to touch, like on what intersectionality can manifest in these stories. But it's tricky, right? Like look, writing comics is not easy. To tell a satisfying story from an adventure plot drama level and then to get all the subtext in and not have one step on the other, like it's tricky business, right?
It's nearly impossible, but the failures are often as instructive as the successes, I
Yeah,
find.
yeah,
Hey,
yeah,
speaking of failures and things that I find questionable,
Oh,
an hour ago I said, so let's talk about Beacon Angel. No, I'm kidding. We had a great conversation, but I'm so curious, and we talked a little bit about it in one of the earlier episodes where we talked about Angel. I want to like Angel a lot more than I actually do
yes.
because I find her execution to be very problematic.
And inconsistent.
I'm also curious, like not to put you on the spot, Evan, and be like, "Hey, a black guy." But like I find it a little weird that she is 14 years old and completely over-sexualized and
yeah,
gets involved in a teen pregnancy story arc. And I feel like a lot of those are stereotypes that I feel like
Yeah.
I hear about a lot for sort of like inner city kids and things like that
Right.
and black kids. And it makes me uncomfortable as a white girl. And I definitely like I'm not, again, I'm sorry. And if I'm putting you on the spot, we can
no, it's fine. It is stuff I thought about. I don't. It's hard to think about this character being as young as 14, right? Like,
Right. That's the thing. Keep going. But
and
yes, yeah.
and I think there's a couple of things going on here. And again, this is me like maybe reading into the text more deeply than was actually there. But like, I think one, again, this is like Morrison's like mutation of a drawing room mystery, right? Of like Clue, right? Where like
Sure.
it's
There's even
it's
lamp shading of that where, right, a character makes that reference. Keep going.
I think, but again, he's making it tawdry. Again, if we bring in like the
Right.
Fleet Street journalism stuff, right? So like that's another piece of it. But I think undergirding all of that is the persistent idea throughout Morrison's X-Men run, which is like normal human society rules don't apply here, you know? And this is something that you
Mm,
really see come into full flower in Krakoa, right? Whereas like, some of the most iconic moments in the Krakoa era are like right at the beginning where you see the resurrection sequences and Storm is like, and it's again, I think Hickman knew what he was doing by having it be Storm, but like, who are you?
yeah.
What is your name? Who are you, mutant? And they
Yeah.
cast off their government names. And I
Yeah.
think the seed of that is planted here, right? Where like Morrison
Mm,
is having a lot of fun playing with the delta between like polite human flatline society, right? And what mutants do in their own, overheated ecosystem. So I think
hmm.
one thing that's interesting is like there's no shaming between Beak and Angel's relationship, right? Like, they're like, all right, so I guess you guys fucked around. And Beak's
Yeah, it's not
struggle.
like how dare you sin against mutant
Exactly.
God. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think that that's a fun twist because they are the whole reason that Beak is selling drugs and Angel is like we have to keep this secret and like they wind up getting involved in this scheme at all is because she's like they can't find out that we have kids
Yeah.
because if they find out that I got pregnant, they're going to kick us out of school. And I do really like that they're like okay, so this just happened. Like it
Yes.
isn't
Yeah.
Right, right.
it isn't like oh my God, how could they do this. I struggled a little with the real world context
No,
of
and the
like
grace, the
Yeah.
grace I'm willing to give Morrison is that he's really putting these characters into a paradigm where like the rules of the surrounding society don't matter. They're actively trying to rewrite those rules, right? And I think again, going back to the Scott and Jean stuff, is like, yeah, like, well, the normal strictures of like romantic relationship dogma have not been satisfying us. Like, what are the other ways
Right.
we can go, right? Again, it doesn't seem to be like, it honestly doesn't feel like Morrison got all the way there, but you can see them gesturing at that, right? Like,
Yes.
and so when it comes to like Angel's portrayal, yes, it is, it's tawdry, like I've been saying, right? It is sensationalistic, but
Mhm.
it doesn't demonize her. It doesn't, she's not a welfare queen here. You know what I'm saying? And
Ah,
Morrison
yes.
knew enough
Yeah.
to like to not step on that landmine.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the unfortunate stereotypes that follow black adolescent femme identifying people like
Yeah.
are here, like Morrison, again, some kind of like story sense prevents them from stepping into the worst of that stuff.
Right. Right.
I
Right.
think Beak is equally as interesting because it feels like you're supposed to read Beak as like a gawky redneck, but Beak's actual speech patterns is very Morrison-esque, like and a lot more proper than you would think. Like
Yeah.
they're a really interesting couple because they kind of contrast each other, but they also kind of don't.
Yeah.
Like Beak is very much like a panicked, gawky kid, and Angel is like a little bit more stable and not as like reactive. But like
Yeah.
they're both teenagers who are like, yeah, we're in this weird school with fucking, a cosmic force of destruction in life on one
Right.
end. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
a creepy ass headmaster like on top of it all. You know what I'm saying? Like the other thing about revisiting this stuff is like Charles is so fucking creepy.
He's so creepy.
Even when Cassandra's not occupying him, he's almost creepier, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. There is still like that kindliness and like avuncular feeling that we associate with like the kind of like traditional canonical understanding of Charles. But
Yeah.
like he's also like at one point he says, "Oh Gene, what are you up to now?" Like
Right. I was like, what a
That's so
dick.
he
patronizing.
does, but he doesn't step in. Like he's
No.
like, "All right, I guess you kids are gonna be horn dogging it around, everybody's minds and whatnot." He's really letting the
Yeah.
petri dish cook. And I
Yeah.
think that's what part of that kind of laissez-faireism is what sets up the stuff that comes after this, right? Especially as pertains to Magneto and the stuff you guys are going to kind of cover in the future. But like, yeah, it really
Yeah.
feels like the thrust of Morrison's project at this point in the run was like, this is the end of society. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
rules we've taken for granted are kind of crumbling all around us. The world's burning. Let's fuck around, have like, bird insect hybrid babies and
Right.
affairs in each other's heads because like one of the things that's interesting about this run is like there is this like seeming contextual setup of like safety, right? The school really isn't
Mm.
under the same kind of threats as it has been in the past in other runs, right? It's a very stable environment. It's safe until it's not. And I think you can see like some of the harbingers of like that danger start to show up in this run. And like everybody's like, I don't know. Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna follow my impulses to really dangerous ends.
I mean, one symbol of that that I really like is they have not cleaned the Kid Omega graffiti. It is still
It's
on the
still
walls.
there. Yeah.
And
Good
that's a
point.
reminder that this all could still happen again.
Yeah.
And it does, and bad things keep happening. But it is this interesting idea. And again, you're absolutely right that, one of the things that Grant talks about in the manifesto is the idea that X-Men, I know Josie said it too, is a story about old versus new. And it's a
Yeah.
story about new ideas fighting old ideas. And that is kind of what we're seeing here. And there's some new ideas that the characters are ready to accept. Like, you know what? It is fine that Beak and Angel, you know, had 100 hybrid babies.
Little weird hybrid
But there's
babies. Yeah.
some new ideas that they're not ready to deal with. And Charles is a great example of someone who is absolutely not ready to deal with new ideas. But you're also seeing, Jean and Scott and Emma, not address these feelings in a sort of mature way that is outside of what is sort of the traditional love triangle dynamic.
Yeah.
Again, like you mentioned that it's not ethical non-monogamy, but like I think ethical non-monogamy could have saved them.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Sure,
But I
absolutely.
think I think they weren't ready for that new idea.
No. Well, certainly Marvel wasn't, but yeah. Do we want to wrap it up there? This seems like,
I think so.
yeah, this seems like a good place to stop. Evan, do you have other things you want to pop
Yeah, I
in?
mean, I kind of want to talk about the cuckoos a little bit because, like,
Please, fire
Please.
away.
I
you
love the
know,
cuckoos. I'm
No,
always
no,
ready to
no
talk
pun
about the
in, no
cuckoos.
pun intended when I say fire away. Apologies, but yes,
Well, no, no, no.
as after the Esme incident,
Evan's
but
gonna
yes,
use his brain to control
me.
you to fire, and I'm gonna sell drugs.
Got it. Sounds great. Okay. Anyway, yes. What were you going to say about the Stepford Cuckoos,
the
Evan?
cuckoos are interesting to me because, like, on one hand, you could look at them on a surface level and be like, yeah, they're like the mean girls, um,
Yeah.
who are like, you know, twins, quintuplets. They start as
Right.
five, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. The 5-in-1.
but the other thing about them that's, again, I think really kind of boundary pushing is that, like, they're maybe the weirdest characters in Morrison's run because
Mm.
there's the presentation of uniformity across the board with them. They're all talking the same word balloons and whatnot. But you see
Oh,
these signs of fracture, right? And I think it's a microcosm, the cuckoos, of again what Morrison's trying to do here. Like, there's a way to present themselves, right? Oh, they're like five freaky little girls who like can read your
right.
mind and manipulate you and stuff. But even within that like veneer, there's fracture, and that's the same thing with this run, right? It's like, oh yeah, you thought you were gonna get like the school and all the
Right.
traditional X-Men stuff, but there's really all this seediness and churn of the new underneath the old, right? And I think the Cuckoos kind of represent that. They're like, again, English boarding school, like that whole
Right.
like prim and proper and posh stuff. Like, but underneath it all, they're like, nah, we just want to, we kind of hate each
Right.
other and want to fuck around and do drugs. And like, I think that's one of the reasons the Cuckoos have lasted so long. Because that's the other thing. This is the early 2000s, and a lot of characters created in this moment don't stand the test of time. So I think it's
No,
interesting to
no.
think about these new X-Men characters that have and the cuckoos amongst them. But yeah, I think that, they're always kind of lurking there. And I think that is another metaphorical manifestation of like the new ideas that like are always bubbling underneath the surface. They're like, you don't know what
Yeah.
they're going to look like. And they can look like the old ideas, but they can, have mutated in some ways that we're not ready to reckon with. So yeah, I think, this little mini arc is a breather between like bigger, more action heavy type of
Sure.
sequences. But like it is the kind of X-Men story that I like in terms of like this is not the classic Claremont softball game type shit. You know what I'm saying? But it does kind of serve the same purpose, right? Like
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
use the tropes of the drawing room mystery. They make a clue reference, like you said before, Josie.
Right. Right.
Like
Right.
let's use these tropes and really use them to fuck with the kind of like canonical understanding of what the whole X-Men enterprise is. And I like the
Right.
storyline about that, a lot about that.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Evan, quick question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Logan.
What about? I mean, what?
No, no,
Listen,
no. We're getting to the question.
Logan. Hot or not?
he's hot. Come on.
Okay,
Like,
thank you. Thank you.
look,
We get so few guests who agree with me on this. It's really ridiculous. And we ask it for a purposeful reason, which is in Morrison's manifesto, they say, we want women slobbering over Logan the way they do Hugh Jack.
So that's my next question. Do you think Hugh Jackman is hot?
yes.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
look, I think Hugh Jackman is doing way too much with like the water cut and all that shit. Look, Hugh Jackman may be actually younger than me, or we're probably around the same age. I'm 53.
Yeah.
Like, I look at somebody like Lenny Kravitz, and I'm like, who's got a couple of years on me. I'm like, go with God, because you eat a carrot and a cucumber, and call that breakfast and lunch, and your man needs a little bit more. But
I'm with you.
getting back to Logan,
Yeah.
like, yes, it's funny
What's
because
this? What's the sex appeal? What's the nature of the sex appeal?
I was getting to that. Like short and hairy and violent, like doesn't do it for me. And I'm pretty straight leaning as these things come. But like the thing about Logan is that like he appeals to me because he's a sensualist, you know? And I always say this about Daredevil too. Like I think Matt Murdock's got to be the best fuck in the Marvel universe. Like
Oh,
because
I see what
Oh,
you're
yeah,
saying, Evan. And
yes, yes, yes.
he hears that heartbeat go up. He's like, "What I'm doing is working." You know what I'm saying? He
Yeah.
can smell the fairy. Listen, he's
No, you're
like
right. He's a very attentive
Matt.
lover. We were
Yes,
just in the Discord talking about Daredevil and whether Daredevil's an egg, and no one could come up with a theory that Daredevil is anything other than tragically cishet, with maybe the gay exception of Foggy. But like most of the time, this is a guy who is tormented not just by Catholicism, but by cis heterosexuality.
yes. And look, I'll say this. I'm stammering because I'm trying to be proper, but fuck it. Like Matt Murdock has never had a problem finding a G spot or any or a clitoris
No,
or anything. Like
no.
no,
That's the
using
thing.
sonar.
It's
I know he
almost
doesn't have sonar.
it's almost too much power for him in the bedroom, and that torments him. I've read Electra Lives Again. Had never had sex. I had never had sex before, and I read Electra Lives Again, Frank Miller's graphic novel thing
yeah,
about
no,
Daredevil having a dream that Electra's alive. And at one point, he wakes up from having sex with just some random woman whose name we don't even know. And he says, it wasn't like love at all. It was more like wax paper. And I was like, ugh, that's
yeah.
like, it's like all of Rivers Cuomo's Tired of Sex in 2 lines, you know? Like the whole song is redundant after it was less like love than wax paper. You're like, ugh, ugh. Anyway,
So
but
getting
yes,
back to Logan, I feel like Logan is in the same category, right? Like
yeah,
a deeply sensual person, like attuned to the natural world
yes,
in a way that most people will never ever know. And that includes like, you know, human physicality. Like so
yeah.
yes, like I think Logan is very hot, very sexy. Like may not
Thank
be
you.
like my type in terms of like what I'll gravitate to, but like
But
yeah, like if you get with Logan, you're having a good time.
thank you very much. That was a very gratifying answer to hear. You hear that, Becca? I'm not the only one, okay? We have a lot of
I don't think Logan
lesbian.
is hot. I don't think
We
Logan is
have a
hot.
lot of lesbians on this show,
Yeah, but
and
Evan's not. Evan says that he's
no, I'm
mostly
just saying,
straight.
like
So
when we have lesbians on, I try to convince them that Wolverine is essentially Stone Butch coded, and I haven't. It's an uphill battle, but I believe in it. Okay, so we should probably wrap it up. Becca, what are we talking about next week?
oh, great question. You think I would have had that ready? God, one day I'll get this. Like we've gotten like 8 episodes done, and
Yeah, well, this is all. None of this is our main job for any of us.
okay. Well, we are talking about the Assault on Weapon Plus story arc next
Yes,
week,
we have one of my
which
favorite people in the world as a guest for that, and I cannot wait.
oh, I'm really excited too. And for those of you reading along at home, let me get the specific issue numbers for that. It is New X-Men 142, 143, 144, and 145.
Yes, it is.
And we're not covering any one-shots in there with it.
I don't know. Let's just tune in next week. You'll have a
Yeah, it's
good
great. Read
time.
that. Read
Read whatever
comics.
you want. We'll have a great time. But make sure you read Assault on Weapon Plus. And yeah, in the meantime, Evan, where can people find you if you want them to find you?
Blue Sky is my only real public facing social media presence nowadays, and I'm Evnarc on there, EVNARC. I have weekly supported Substack, which I need to do better about, which is evannarcissus.substack.com. And yes, I'm thinking about migrating it. I just need to put in the time to figure that all out. Yeah, that's it. And I'm working on the upcoming Wu-Tang game, Wu-Tang Rise of the Deceiver,
Yes.
Ooh, that's so.
about
I didn't
more
know that.
which.
I didn't know that's what you were working on.
I
That's
didn't
so
know that was what
exciting.
you were working on, and I'm so excited
No,
about
that's
that.
my day
God bless
job.
you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's where you can find me. And I have another comics project to be announced in the coming weeks. I think end of August. I can't say anything more about it, but
Ooh.
it's I'm very excited about it. I
Well,
can tell
this
you guys to
episode
correct me.
this episode isn't coming out until the autumn, so
Oh,
just
okay.
just
Yeah, we're
everybody
banking all of these way ahead of time.
everybody go check Evan's Blue Sky
Now
account,
probably
and I'm
public.
sure Evan will have announced a cool comics project that he's working on.
Yeah.
And yeah, please everyone keep on the lookout for that. If you are looking out for things by me, I am at my home website, which is josie.zone, like the Twilight Zone, josie.zone. And that exact string of characters is also my Blue Sky handle, where you can see me post far too much on that little social platform. And if you want to look at the website for this podcast, you can go to herecomestomorrow.net. And Becca, where can people find you?
Well, if you want to see me posting even more than Josie, you can find me at
My.
Tall Girl Petunia on Blue Sky. You can also find my writing about my other special interest, the works of Jim Henson, on the website toughpigs.com. And check out my podcast that by now should be out. I hope my other podcast, Prairie Dawn Companion, about the Muppets and feminism, that you can find on the Muppet Fan Podcast with toughpigs.com feed.
So that does it for this episode. We'll see you next week. And until then, remember, burn away what doesn't work. Thank you so much, everyone.